Former special counsel Jack Smith was in the hot seat there yesterday. Lawmakers grilled him about his investigation into President Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election.
Smith was subpoenaed to testify as part of a Republican-led investigation into the 2020 election interference case that the president sought publicly. In the closed-door hearing, Smith defended his prosecutorial decisions. He said his team found, quote, proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump had engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the election.
NBC News senior justice reporter Ryan Riley joins us now with more on this. Ryan, good morning. So this is a hearing that took place behind closed doors, even though Smith wanted it to happen in public. Tell us more about what he had to say and how Democratic lawmakers are reacting.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what we know from his testimony is that he emphasized that he had a very solid case against Donald Trump and that they could have gotten a conviction in court had this case been allowed to go to trial. But because Donald Trump was elected, this case was dismissed. Under Justice Department precedent, you cannot continue a case.
Hey friends, welcome to Jack Mockler. So this is what just happened, guys. Jack Smith's investigation has erupted back into public view with explosive new details, revealing presidential misconduct more extensive than previously known. The cases collapse not on weak evidence, but on procedural barriers, immunity rulings, and DOJ policy against prosecuting sitting presidents. And Smith's comprehensive report now documents an unprecedented criminal effort to overturn the 2020 election, subpoenaing phone logs from lawmakers and tracing January 6 communications with remarkable precision. The special counsel wrote in his official report that the evidence compelled prosecution of Trump for his efforts to unlawfully retain power after losing the election to Joe Biden.
Against a sitting president. So it wasn't about the merits of the case so much as it was just about the overall Justice Department policy. But, you know, based on that testimony, essentially what you're looking at here is a battle between Republicans who are seeking to undermine this investigation and undercut it, and Jack Smith, who's saying that this was all very warranted and that they did things by the book and correctly. And so, you know, the fact that this wasn't public, that's something that Jack Smith wanted, but that's something that Republicans denied. And I think that Raskin went to the camera and actually talked about this afterwards. Take a listen.
Chairman Jordan made an excellent decision in not allowing Jack Smith to testify publicly, because had he done so, it would have been absolutely devastating to the president and all the president's men involved in the insurrectionary activities of January the 6th. His report speaks for itself in terms of January the 6th and the indictments that were handed down. And the other report should be public. I mean, that's just absolutely aberrational that it's not public.
Let that statement sink in for a moment, because it is one of the most significant declarations ever made by a federal prosecutor about a sitting president. A prosecutor with access to all the evidence, with subpoena power, and the ability to compel testimony from witnesses, concluded that the facts demanded prosecution. This is not vague or ambiguous language subject to political interpretation. This is a prosecutor saying we had the goods, we should have been able to take this to trial, and we would have secured a conviction from a jury. Smith concluded that Trump engaged in what he called an unprecedented criminal effort to overturn the election results and stay in power illegally, despite having lost.
So thus far, we haven't seen any leaks from Republicans about what exactly happened during the testimony, but I think that's something we could potentially look forward to in the future, Joe.
What has the reaction been like from Republicans and the Trump administration?
Yeah, you know, because of all that was happening yesterday, we haven't seen too much, but usually how the playbook works here, and I think what Jack Smith was sort of anticipating is that they were going to sort of find these selections and selectively bring out various parts of the testimony to sort of churn up controversy about what happened in that hearing. That was sort of the entire playbook, the reason that it's happening behind the scenes. And I think what happened here was you had a situation where Jack Smith sort of got ahead, and at least for this round, we'll see how it plays out in the future, but it seems that Jack Smith came out ahead, for at least on the public relations side.
The report documents how Trump induced state officials to ignore true vote counts in their states to benefit him. It details how he promoted fake elector slates in 7 different states across the country as part of a coordinated scheme. It explains how he directed supporters to the Capitol to obstruct the certification of the election on January 6th, knowing they were angry and armed. All of this is documented in black and white by a special counsel who had access to witnesses and records that the public never saw during the investigations because they were conducted under seal. Smith's office believed the evidence would have led to Trump's conviction at trial if they had been able to proceed with the prosecution before the election changed everything.
This morning, special counsel Jack Smith saying the government had enough evidence to convict Donald Trump had he not been reelected. An extraordinary capstone to an investigation into the president-elect's efforts to maintain power after he lost the 2020 election. A report spanning more than 100 pages. Now the final word on Smith's findings in the historic case that was set to go to a jury in Washington, if not for the department's long-standing policy against prosecuting a sitting president. The special counsel writing, but for Mr. Trump's election and imminent return to the presidency, the office assessed that the admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. Smith laying out what he called Trump's unprecedented criminal effort to hold on to power, including pressure on state officials and on his vice president to overturn the 2020 results. Smith also focusing on Trump's encouragement of the January 6 rioters.
They specifically stated that this would have happened if not for Trump's election and imminent return to the presidency, which triggered immunity issues and political question problems that courts were unwilling to override. The cases were dismissed not because the evidence was weak, but because Trump won the election and the legal landscape shifted in ways that made prosecution impossible. Now there is even more coming out that makes this situation even more explosive and damaging to Trump's claims of innocence and political persecution.
We fight like hell.
The president-elect pled not guilty to all charges, consistently accusing the Justice Department of targeting him unfairly while using this investigation to his political advantage during his re-election bid.
Whoever heard you get indicted for interfering with a presidential election where you have every right to do it? You get indicted and your poll numbers go up.
Trump responding to the report in a series of posts overnight, railing against Smith, writing, Jack is a lame-brained prosecutor who was unable to get his case tried before the election.
We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone.
Smith staying largely out of public view for more than a year after indicting Trump, but now defending himself and his team, writing in a letter accompanying the report, to all who know me well, the claim from Mr. Trump that my decisions as a prosecutor were influenced or directed by the Biden administration is, in a word, laughable.
Recent reporting has revealed internal Justice Department emails showing that Smith subpoenaed phone logs of several Republican lawmakers, including prominent senators. He did this despite internal warnings about litigation risk from other Justice Department lawyers who worried about the political fallout of going after sitting members of Congress. Those emails describe evidence suggesting Trump directly contacted senators around 6 in the evening on January 6th, while the Capitol riot was actively happening with violence, and asked Rudy Giuliani to reach out to other senators to help delay the certification of the election results. We now have evidence that Trump was making calls to senators during the riot, asking them to delay certification while people were breaking into the Capitol building and fighting with police. Staff for current congressional leaders were allegedly involved in efforts to push fake Wisconsin electors, according to the documents Smith obtained. This is not speculation or conspiracy theory from political opponents. This is what a special counsel documented with subpoenas, phone records, and witness testimony under oath from people who were there. The cases may be gone, but the evidence is not going anywhere. Smith's lawyers recently sent a letter defending his work as consistent with Justice Department rules and regulations, taking what appeared to be a veiled swipe at Trump's claims of political persecution by pointing to the depth of evidence in the report as justification for the charges he brought. Meanwhile, a separate inquiry has been opened into whether Smith's prosecutions may have violated the Hatch Act by influencing the election. So his findings and tactics are staying in the news one way or another, regardless of what Trump wants. Most people heard that Trump's federal cases got dismissed and assumed that meant he was cleared or exonerated, or that the evidence was not strong enough to convict him if given the chance. But that is not what happened at all. The critical distinction between legal dismissal and actual innocence must be understood clearly. The cases got dismissed because of legal changes and court rulings about presidential immunity. not because of anything wrong with the evidence Smith collected over years of painstaking investigation. And that evidence is still out there, documented in official reports and subpoena records, creating a permanent public record of what Trump did that will never go away. The special counsel's report runs over 100 pages of detailed findings based on witness interviews, documents, and communications records from inside the Trump White House and his inner circle. Smith had access to people inside the administration who saw what happened firsthand and were willing to testify. He had phone records and text messages showing who talked to whom and when during the critical days around January 6th. He had testimony from officials who were in the room when these decisions were being made. The report documents how Trump knew that key fraud claims were false even as he repeated them publicly to justify his efforts to overturn the election. This is crucial because it goes directly to intent, which is what prosecutors need to prove in a criminal case. Trump was not just mistaken about fraud based on bad information. According to Smith, he was told by his own people that specific claims were not true, and he kept making them anyway. The report specifically mentions the claim that there were more votes than voters in Pennsylvania, which was mathematically impossible. Trump's own team told him this was false and could not be supported. He said it anyway repeatedly. Smith documented how Trump pressured state officials to change vote counts in his favor, despite knowing he had lost the election legitimately according to the certified results. He laid out the fake elector scheme where Trump allies in 7 states created slates of fake electors who claimed to represent those states even though Biden had won them fairly. These fake electors then submitted their credentials to Congress as if they were legitimate, creating the legal pretext for objecting to the certification on January 6th and stopping the transfer of power. The depth and breadth of what Jack Smith uncovered during his investigation is staggering. And as more details emerge from the documentary record, the full scope of the scheme becomes increasingly clear. The report details Trump's role in directing supporters to the Capitol on January 6th to stop the certification process by any means necessary. Smith concluded that Trump knew the crowd was angry and armed with weapons, and that he sent them to the Capitol anyway, with the specific goal of obstructing the certification process. This is the core of what would have been charged as obstruction of an official proceeding, using the mob to delay or prevent Congress from doing its constitutional duty to certify the election and transfer power peacefully. The evidence on this point is particularly damning because it establishes a direct causal link between Trump's actions and the violence that ensued. Legal analysts who have reviewed the Smith report extensively have concluded that the evidence against Trump was overwhelming and would have convinced any reasonable jury of his guilt. Detailed analysis highlights that Smith presented extensive proof of Trump's knowledge that fraud claims were false when he made them publicly and privately. Major news organizations summarizing the report have noted that Smith's office believed conviction was likely based on the strength of what they had gathered during the multi-year investigation. These are not partisan assessments from Trump opponents looking to score political points. These are evaluations from legal experts who specialize in analyzing federal prosecutions and understand exactly what it takes to secure a conviction in a complex criminal case. So why did the cases get dismissed if the evidence was so strong and conviction was likely according to the prosecutors themselves? The answer lies in the Supreme Court's immunity ruling and the timing of Trump's election victory, which fundamentally altered the legal landscape. The immunity ruling created a framework that gave presidents sweeping protection for official acts performed while in office, regardless of how those acts might otherwise be criminal. Trump's lawyers argued that much of what Smith charged involved official presidential conduct that was now immune from prosecution under this new framework created by the conservative Supreme Court majority. Once Trump won the election, the Justice Department's long-standing policy against prosecuting sitting presidents kicked in and made it procedurally impossible to proceed with the cases regardless of the evidence. Smith himself acknowledged this frustrating reality in his report to the American people. He wrote that the only reason Trump was not going to trial was because of his election and return to the presidency, not because of any weakness in the evidence his team had gathered over years of work. The cases were dismissed because of legal changes, not facts about what Trump did during and after the 2020 election. Critics of this outcome argue that this demonstrates the system is fundamentally broken, that a president can commit crimes and escape accountability simply by winning an election and running out the clock. Supporters of the president argue that it shows the prosecutions were political from the start and should never have been brought against a political opponent, that the legal system ultimately protected the presidency from partisan attack. The newly revealed subpoenas of Republican lawmakers add another dimension to this story that continues to develop as more information comes out through reporting and document releases. Smith did not just investigate Trump himself. He investigated the entire network of people around Trump who allegedly helped with the schemes to overturn the election and keep him in power. The phone log subpoenas for prominent senators show that Smith was tracing exactly who Trump contacted and when during the critical hours of January 6th while the riot was happening. The Internal Justice Department emails that came out show there were serious concerns about going after sitting members of Congress with subpoenas for their phone records. Lawyers warned about litigation risk, meaning they thought lawmakers might fight the subpoenas in court and create legal problems for the investigation going forward. But Smith pushed forward anyway, despite these warnings, and got the records he was seeking from the phone companies. Those records apparently show Trump reaching out to senators around 6 in the evening on January 6th, while the riot was ongoing at the Capitol building, asking for help delaying certification of the election results. Think about what that means for understanding what happened that day and Trump's role in the violence. The Capitol had been breached by the mob of his supporters. People were fighting with police in the hallways and breaking windows. Lawmakers were hiding in secure locations, fearing for their lives from the crowd. And according to these records, Trump was on the phone asking senators to delay the very process that the rioters were trying to stop through violence and intimidation. That is extraordinary evidence of coordination between Trump's legal strategy and what was happening on the ground. The fake elector scheme documentation is equally damaging when you look at the details Smith uncovered during his investigation. Staff for current congressional leaders were allegedly involved in efforts to push fake Wisconsin electors, according to the documents. Other staff members were apparently connected as well to some of these efforts. This suggests the scheme was not just a few rogue actors operating on their own. It was a coordinated effort involving people at multiple levels of Republican politics and government working together toward a common goal. All of this evidence exists in the public record now for anyone to examine and draw their own conclusions. The cases may be dismissed by the courts. Trump may never face trial on these charges in his lifetime. But the documentation is there for historians, journalists, and voters to examine forever, and it is still coming out piece by piece. The special counsel's findings continue to generate new reporting and analysis as more documents become available through various legal channels. Every new release adds another layer of detail to the picture of what happened during and after the 2020 election. This is a story that will not simply fade away because the criminal cases ended without trial. The evidence is too extensive, too detailed, and too damning to be forgotten or dismissed. It will remain part of the historical record of this period in American democracy, shaping how future generations understand what happened and what was at stake. The question is whether it will also shape how current voters understand the choices they face, or whether political polarization will render the evidence irrelevant to electoral outcomes. The reporting on Smith's evidence has exposed the inner workings of an investigation that went far beyond what most Americans realized at the time. The special counsel was not content to simply look at surface-level evidence. He delved deep into the machinery of the effort to overturn the election, tracing connections and documenting communications that revealed the full scope of the scheme. He subpoenaed records from phone companies, interviewed dozens of witnesses under oath, and built a comprehensive case that would have been devastating in a courtroom. The fact that the case never reached a jury does not change the underlying reality of what the evidence shows. It simply means that procedural barriers prevented the legal system from delivering a verdict on the facts. As more evidence continues to surface, the public is gaining a clearer understanding of just how close the country came to a constitutional crisis that could have fundamentally altered the course of American democracy. The fake elector scheme was not a fringe operation conducted by a few desperate individuals. It was a coordinated effort that involved officials at multiple levels of government, all working toward the same goal of overturning a legitimate election. The phone calls to senators during the riot were not innocent inquiries about the status of the certification. They were efforts to delay and obstruct a constitutional process using the chaos and violence that had been unleashed by Trump's supporters. The false fraud claims were not mistakes or misunderstandings. They were deliberate lies that Trump continued to tell even after being told they were false. The evidence Smith gathered is now part of the permanent public record and will shape how voters understand what happened, regardless of whether Trump ever faces trial on these charges. The special counsel's report is an official government document that details exactly what Smith found during his investigation. The subpoena records and internal emails that are coming out add more detail to the picture of what happened during and after the election. This documentation exists independently of the criminal cases and cannot be dismissed or sealed just because the prosecutions ended without trial. Historians will use this evidence to write the definitive accounts of January 6th and Trump's efforts to stay in power, despite losing the election fairly. Journalists will continue reporting on new details as they emerge from the investigation files. The implications of what Jack Smith uncovered extend far beyond the specific charges that were ultimately dismissed, reaching into the very fabric of American democratic institutions and the rule of law itself. Voters will have access to information that shows what a federal prosecutor concluded after a thorough investigation with subpoena power. The question is whether any of this matters politically or whether Trump's supporters will dismiss it all as a witch hunt, regardless of what the evidence actually shows about his conduct. The answer to that question will go a long way toward determining whether the evidence Smith gathered ultimately serves as a check on presidential power or becomes just another partisan artifact in an increasingly polarized political landscape. Trump's retribution agenda and the ongoing legal battles over his conduct mean this evidence will keep surfacing in ways that could create problems for him and his allies throughout his second term. The special counsel's investigation has been tracking hundreds of perceived enemies that Trump has targeted since returning to office as part of his revenge campaign. The evidence Smith gathered could become ammunition for those Trump targets as they fight back against the administration in court. Congressional Democrats could use it for oversight investigations if they gain any power in upcoming elections. The separate inquiry into whether Smith's prosecutions violated the Hatch Act shows the evidence and tactics will stay in the news through investigations going the other direction as well against Smith himself. Trump allies want to discredit Smith and his findings completely to make the evidence go away. That means relitigating what he found and how he found it in public forums, which means the evidence keeps getting discussed and examined and reported on, keeping the January 6th story alive even as Trump tries desperately to move past it and focus on other priorities. The more Trump supporters attack Smith and his investigation, the more attention they draw to what he actually found. This creates a dynamic where the evidence remains in the public eye precisely because of the efforts to discredit it. Every attack on Smith generates new coverage of his findings, new analysis of what he uncovered, and new opportunities for the public to understand what happened. The consequences of this situation are profound for American democracy and the rule of law. If a president can engage in the kind of conduct documented by Smith and escape accountability simply by winning re-election, it fundamentally undermines the principle that no one is above the law. It sends a message that presidential misconduct can be immunized by electoral success, that the only real check on presidential power is the ballot box, and that even the most serious abuses of power can be rendered moot by political victory. This is not a sustainable model for democratic governance. The rule of law requires that everyone, including the president, be subject to legal accountability for their actions. When that principle is compromised, the foundation of democratic governance begins to crumble. But there is also a countervailing force at work here. The evidence Smith gathered is now part of the public record, and it will remain accessible to historians, journalists, and concerned citizens for generations. The truth of what happened during and after the 2020 election is documented in official government reports that cannot be erased or rewritten. Even if Trump escapes legal accountability, he cannot escape history. The judgment of future generations will be shaped by the evidence Smith collected, not by the procedural technicalities that prevented it from being presented in a courtroom. This is cold comfort for those who wanted to see Trump held accountable in their lifetime, but it is not nothing. It ensures that the full story will eventually be told. As we look ahead to what comes next, there are several developments worth watching closely. More documents and emails will likely emerge from Smith's investigation as congressional inquiries pull additional material into public view through hearings and subpoenas. How Republican lawmakers named in the subpoenas respond to questions about their contacts with Trump on January 6th will reveal much about their level of involvement and their willingness to be transparent with the public. The Hatch Act inquiry could produce findings that either discredit Smith or validate his approach to investigating presidential misconduct. And perhaps most importantly, how Democrats use this evidence heading into the upcoming elections will determine whether it becomes a central campaign issue or fades into the background of a crowded political landscape. The criminal cases may be over, but the evidence is not going away anytime soon, no matter what Trump and his allies want. Jack Smith documented what he found in official reports that will exist forever as part of the historical record of this presidency. The question now is whether that evidence matters to voters or whether legal barriers and political polarization mean Trump faces no real accountability for what a federal prosecutor says he did to try to steal a legitimate election. One thing is clear from all of this evidence that has come out. The facts are on the record now for everyone to see and evaluate. Smith said the evidence compelled prosecution of the president. He said conviction was likely if the case had gone to trial. He documented the fake electors and the phone calls to lawmakers and the false fraud claims that Trump kept repeating. Whether voters care about any of that or whether they have moved on and do not want to hear about it anymore will determine what this evidence ultimately means for American democracy going forward. The evidence exists regardless of what anyone thinks about it. It is documented in official reports, supported by subpoena records and witness testimony, and available for anyone to examine. The question is what we do with it. Do we hold our leaders accountable when they abuse their power, or do we look the other way because it is politically convenient? Do we insist on the rule of law for everyone, or do we accept that some people are above it? These are the fundamental questions that the Smith investigation has forced upon the American people. The special counsel did his job. He investigated thoroughly, gathered extensive evidence, and presented his findings to the American people in a comprehensive report. What happens next is up to us. We can choose to engage with the evidence, to understand what happened, and to demand accountability. Or we can choose to ignore it, to dismiss it as partisan politics, and to move on as if nothing happened. The choice we make will determine what kind of country we become. The evidence is there for everyone to see. The question is whether we have the courage to look at it honestly and to act on what we find. This is not just about Donald Trump. It is about the future of American democracy and whether we will allow the rule of law to survive in an age of political polarization and executive overreach. The evidence Smith gathered is a testament to the importance of independent investigations and the rule of law. It shows that even the most powerful person in the country can be investigated and held accountable if there is the political will to do so. It demonstrates the importance of a free press in bringing such investigations to public attention. And it underscores the critical role of the judiciary in ensuring that the law is applied equally to everyone, regardless of their status or power. The fact that Trump ultimately escaped legal accountability does not diminish the importance of what Smith accomplished. The investigation itself was a vital exercise of democratic accountability, ensuring that the truth would be documented and preserved for history. The story of the Smith investigation is still being written. More evidence will come out, more revelations will emerge, and the full picture of what happened during and after the 2020 election will eventually be complete. When that picture is fully assembled, it will serve as a powerful reminder of the fragility of democratic institutions and the importance of vigilance in protecting them. The evidence Smith gathered is a gift to future generations, a documented record of what can happen when a president refuses to accept the legitimate outcome of an election. Whether we learn the lessons it offers is up to us. The facts are there for everyone to see. The only question is what we choose to do with them.